Hello, I'm Meghan Brunaugh, a Coast Guard veteran and an active duty military spouse. While the transition out of the service for each veteran is individual, the struggle is universal. One might assume that the Department of Defense and Veterans Affairs would give us helpful instructions on how to succeed in our post-military life, but in reality, most of us don't know what our civilian life holds until after we've separated. For me, higher education was the pathway to success in my transition from active duty military to the civilian world, and I believe it's the model to help all of our veterans in reintegration.
I'm Charlotte Creech, a veteran spouse, sibling, and supporter. For many service members, the unplanned beginnings upon exiting the military eventually lead to planned futures. And for us personally, our unplanned beginning was our experiences watching those around us struggle through the transition process and the realization about the scope and the social impact of the problem, which is what motivated us to take ownership and seek to solve it through the formation of a social enterprise. It's the connecting of these experiences which makes both the story and the solution. My husband, Senior Airman Andrew Creech, enlisted in the Air Force on his 18th birthday, just 1 week before the terrorist attacks of September 11th. As a senior in high school, he considered going to college like so many of his friends, but instead felt compelled to enlist in the military, and so he did. During his 4-year service, he trained to be a firefighter, and upon finishing his military duty, he was anxious to return home to Connecticut and begin his post-military career. But he didn't receive the homecoming that our service members dream of or deserve. He found himself without a job and had to move back in with his parents. It was shortly after this that I met him, and I quickly learned there were huge problems with the transition process. I watched him apply for job after job and get discouraged as time and time again he was overlooked. I didn't understand how someone who had worked so hard and given so much willingly for our country could be left to struggle through his transition back to the civilian world. The system wasn't working and something needed to change, but neither of us knew where to turn to for help. And something else was missing too. He missed military life, the camaraderie, and the sense of serving a mission greater than he. So he re-enlisted in the Air Force Reserves. Months passed, and feeling he had reached a dead end, he started to research other options, and he knew as a veteran he had the GI Bill and could go to school tuition-free, so he applied to college to retrain for a civilian career. I fully supported this decision, but I didn't realize how overwhelming the application process would be for him. Trying to locate and apply to a higher education program as an older, non-traditional student was a daunting challenge. And unlike many aspiring students, he didn't have the benefit of high school guidance counselors, teachers, and involved parents to help coach him along the way or educate him about the importance of selecting the right institution or course of study. As the only person in his life that had attended college, I helped him through the tedious paperwork and the college essay writing, but as a civilian, I didn't understand the red tape surrounding the military education benefits and how they would apply to the different programs he was considering. So we struggled through the process, and together we finally figured it out, and he was accepted into college. And I was so proud of him and overjoyed at the thought that in just a few short years, he would have career opportunities available to him and would no longer feel stuck in a dead-end job where he would never have the sense of accomplishment and pride that he experienced in the military. But just when it seemed like our dreams were being fulfilled, an unplanned obstacle stopped us in our tracks. Andy was called up to serve in the reserves and was deployed to Iraq the same month that he was supposed to begin school. By the time he returned home from combat, he had missed a year of school and was told by the university that he would need to reapply if he wanted to enroll as a student the following year. He was disheartened, and I was furious. Couldn't the university make an exception to the rule for our nation's heroes at war? How could this happen? Writing college essays had been painful enough the first time around, and he no longer understood where he fit into the higher education environment, so he decided not to reapply. Watching my husband struggle through the transition process was frustrating and upsetting, and it left me resenting the university that was content in letting Andy slip through the cracks, as well as the Department of Veteran Affairs for not providing the structured guidance that he needed to succeed. There had to be a higher education program out there that would have supported Andy through his deployment and reintegration and welcomed him back with open arms instead of shutting him out. But we didn't know where to find them. I imagined there had to be a better way to ease veterans through the transition process to higher education. But at the time, I didn't know the answers, and I felt powerless to make a change. So life went on, and Andy eventually secured that civilian firefighting job, and I went to pursue my master's degree in business, and things were going well, so we stopped dwelling on the frustration he experienced during his transition. I had no idea at the time that this experience would follow me through my own life path and come back to form the foundation of the future I was planning.
Like Andy, mine was a twisted path after separation, but unlike Andy, when I left the service in 2009, I knew that I was going back to school. Not because I had some wonderful life plan in place, but really I had no idea what I wanted to do or what I was skilled to do, so I saw college as a way to help me figure that out. I joined the service because I loved the water and wanted to be at sea, but the experience of being deployed for 6 months in such a male-dominated culture left me seeking another path. I did my undergraduate work at the Coast Guard Academy in New London, Connecticut, and then served 6 years active duty following a number of different assignments, from a ship driver in San Francisco, a logistics officer deployed in the Persian Gulf, a weapons training officer in New Orleans, a diversity recruiter in Connecticut. Basically a conflagration of duties, but none of which I saw as a career. So when I decided to leave the military, I was given a 4-day course on my life after the service called the TAPS class. Yes. There were about 30 people in the class, various ages, military ranks, and experience. And here's what it consisted of. About a half a day of medical paperwork, a few random speakers, and my personal favorite, a talk about how everyone in the room should go and work for the Department of Corrections as a prison guard officer. The last day consisted of mock interviews between students, but since none of us had ever had a civilian job interview before, the exercise was meaningless. So I saw my MBA as a way to help me figure out what my best next step would be. So I was accepted into my program of choice and said I wanted to pursue marketing because some personality test told me I'd be good at that. But I had to make a lot of adjustments. Like I had to not stand at attention when talking to my teacher in class, not address everyone as sir or ma'am, and interact with a wide range of diversity that I just didn't encounter when I was in the service. But for me, it was the best experience. I actually ended up having my first child during the second semester of my program, and I was so nervous to tell the school, thinking I'd be looked down upon as another woman needing an accommodation, as it can sadly sometimes be viewed in the military, but I received nothing but congratulations and encouragement. It was wonderful, and it really validated the fact that I'd made the right decision. So I assumed once I graduated, I would take some big corporate job and learn the art of business. But then I was fortunate enough to get a graduate assistantship in the social entrepreneurship department and got to work with a program called EBV, or the Entrepreneurship Bootcamp for Veterans with Disabilities. And I assisted a group of wounded veterans who were interested in starting their own business. And it gives me chills. It was so inspiring to see these former military members going after their passions and being able to make a living doing so. Never before had I personally considered this as an option, but the power of seeing role models, people who had gone before you and succeeded, it was such a powerful tool. So I actually started taking classes in entrepreneurship. And these classes asked us to look at our own business idea, and I kept coming back to 2 experiences I had in the military. One, as an education service officer, which helps military members find, locate, and use their military benefits for education. And the second one as an admissions officer at the Coast Guard Academy. So having seen the 2 sides, one, how military members look for higher education programs, sometimes based more on convenience than factors that will actually determine success. And then on the other side, seeing the admissions process and how colleges process applications and sometimes the random sporacity of how acceptance are made, it really led me to thinking there has to be a better way to help military and veterans through their college search and application process. I mean, when I went through my 4-day TAPS class, there was no guidance on how to transition to higher education, and the more questions I asked on support for veterans, looking at schools, the more I didn't like the answers. So my last class, during my last semester, I was put in a group with Charlotte, and we were asked to do a business plan. And initially we viewed it as just another assignment to complete so we could move on, graduate, and get those big starting salaries that we're told all MBA graduates will have no problem getting. So I suggested a business that would help match veterans with their best fit higher education programs based on specific supportive criteria that are important for veterans, such as how close is a school to the nearest VA hospital? Do they have someone there that can help with PTSD? Is there a student veteran club on campus that will give them that community support?
Meg's idea immediately resonated with me because of Andy's struggle. And it reminded me of the frustrating experience we endured and the negative emotions that I harbored. And as we conducted more research, sadly, we realized that our experiences were not isolated examples. The military spends years training service members on military habits and protocol, but when these same service members transition back into civilian life, they're not given any guidance on how to break free of their training. They spend mere hours learning how to write a resume and prepare for a civilian job, but no time learning how to apply to educational programs or start their own business. Currently, there are 1 million unemployed veterans, and it's expected an additional 1 million service members will exit the military by 2016. This year alone, nearly 600,000 veteran students will enroll in higher education programs across the U.S. at a cost of over $10 billion to the U.S. government, and that number is growing. Veterans possess valuable skills that are separating them from their civilian counterparts. They have more exposure to highly advanced technology, they're resilient, adaptable, and they assume high levels of trust, just to name a few. So the skills that we as taxpayers give them are just as valuable to employers in the private sector as they are in the military, but they need to be adapted for a different environment, and that's where higher education comes into play.
And the data has already proven that training separating military service members through higher education is a great benefit to our nation. The Montgomery GI Bill, which was drafted to serve returning World War II veterans and is the precursor to today's 9/11 GI Bill, within the first 12 years served over 8.8 million returning GIs. And not only was it a huge success in utilization, but it was a huge success in its output. A GI Bill recipient was a better educated, working, tax-paying member of society who ended up returning $7 to every $1 invested in them through the Montgomery GI Bill. A 7-to-1 return.
Yet this new generation of veterans are facing greater challenges than their predecessors. While it's great that the post-9/11 GI Bill will pay up to 100% of college tuitions and fees, the unintended consequences of this is that it's causing some programs to focus solely on how profitable it is to recruit veteran students, rather than no concern on how to support them on campus or help them graduate. Specifically, some for-profit colleges have heavily targeted veterans through deceptive marketing practices. And while their bottom line has greatly increased as a result, the veteran graduation rates and employment numbers for students enrolled in these programs do not warrant the taxpayers' investment. Among the approximately 800,000 veterans currently enrolled in college, nearly 88% will drop out within their first year, and only 3% will graduate.
So all this data, backed by personal experience, became our call to action. There's 3 key support structures needed to affect change for student veterans. 1 is a revamped college search process. 2 is a supportive veteran and collegiate community. And 3 is an integrated employment process. So for the college search, military members don't know what they don't know, so they need to have all the factors presented to them in a transparent way so they can search and then locate these factors at individual institutions. For the community, having groups of student veterans, former military faculty, friendly collegiate leadership, all this brings forward that sense of community that many service members miss when they transition, and having that increases the likelihood of successful continuation in education. And the employment piece is so key, because college placement services may not understand the unique experiences that prior military bring to the table, or how to market those skills to potential employers. So having readily available internships and job opportunities for student veterans with companies that have already proven their military supportiveness can greatly facilitate employment upon graduation.
We had an idea, we had a passion, and now we had a plan. We were encouraged to launch our company in lieu of taking formal corporate jobs. And ironically, when I left my corporate job to pursue my MBA, I never intended on becoming an entrepreneur. But here we are, a year and a half later, the founders of a tech startup with the solution in hand. We formed our company to bring community and transparency to the transition process to ensure our veterans would have the tools and resources needed to make a successful transition, as well as the ability to connect with the programs that would provide the best fit. Our web-based technology matches veterans with higher education and businesses by offering a tailored veteran college search engine, resume builder, internship and employment opportunities at civilian employers, all within a vibrant social community of student veterans, educators, employers, and civilian supporters and mentors.
I know this next generation of returning veterans can define our nation, the same way the returning World War II veterans did. But it'll depend on how we're treated and supported once out of uniform. Now, while a much smaller percent of the U.S. population has served in uniform in wartime past, I'm confident that even those of us not personally connected to these sacrifices can appreciate the burden they bear. We can all work together to ensure that every man and woman that served in uniform can grow and succeed once they move on from camo to khakis. And I know that higher education holds the key for achieving success. There's many ills plaguing education, but imagine if this model of student support and utilization is used not just for veterans, but for any population segment seeking to achieve. Instead of using SAT scores and selective acceptance rates to find a college, imagine if we evaluated programs by community reviews and user experiences, by their student support effectiveness and the campus cultural fit. Like, what a difference could that make for that first-generation college kid lost in the crowd, or the low-income sophomore who doesn't know what path to choose? And what a difference this already does make for our returning veterans. And we hope you'll join us in our effort to build a community of opportunity around our returning military. Thank you.